March 6, 1943, Major General George S. Patton, Jr. walked into the headquarters of the U.S. Second Corps in North Africa. The building was quiet. Too quiet. Officers moved through the hallways with the hesitant shuffle of men who knew they had failed. No one spoke above a whisper. The air felt heavy with defeat, like a battlefield after the guns had gone silent. Then Patton arrived. He wore a polished steel helmet, ivory-handled revolvers, and an expression that made every officer in the building uneasy. He did not smile. He did not pause. He took command the moment he stepped inside. By the end of his first day, multiple officers were relieved of command. By the end of his first week, the number reached dozens. Within 10 days, Second Corps was unrecognizable. Patton had been sent to fix a disaster. American forces had just suffered the worst defeat U.S. ground troops had experienced in North Africa, the bloodiest week they had yet seen in the war. An entire division had been routed. Images of American soldiers surrendering were broadcast around the world. Eisenhower gave Patton one mission: restore order, restore discipline, restore the fighting spirit of an army shattered at Kasserine Pass. What followed was one of the most ruthless leadership purges in U.S. Army history. Patton fired officers for cowardice, for incompetence, for being in the wrong place, for failing to wear their helmets properly. He transformed a defeated, demoralized corps into a fighting force in 10 days by making every officer terrified of being the next one sent home in disgrace. This is the story of how Patton saved the American Army in North Africa by destroying the careers of dozens of officers who had failed to fight. Not because they lacked courage, but because they were not ready. February 14, 1943. German forces under Field Marshal Erwin Rommel launched Operation Frühlingswind, attacking American positions near Sidi Bouzid in Tunisia. American forces had been in North Africa for only 3 months. Most American soldiers had never seen combat. Their officers had never commanded troops under fire. They were facing battle-hardened German veterans who had been fighting in the desert for over 2 years. By February 15th, the situation was catastrophic. Young soldiers from Kansas and Ohio, men who had been told they were the best in the world, were discarding rifles just to run faster. The German offensive did not slow. On February 19th, Rommel sent his panzer divisions straight through Kasserine Pass. Within hours, the American defense collapsed completely. Major General Lloyd Frendenow commanded Second Corps from a headquarters 70 miles behind the front lines. When the attack began, he could not coordinate a response. He did not know where his own units were. He blamed subordinates for failures rooted in his own poor planning. By February 24th, the battle was over. American forces had suffered more than 6,000 casualties. The 168th Infantry Regiment lost 2,000 men. The 1st Armored Division lost 183 tanks. Hundreds of Americans were captured and paraded before German cameras for propaganda. British commanders questioned whether American troops could fight at all. German commanders concluded the Americans were poorly led and easily defeated. Something had to change immediately. Eisenhower knew exactly who to send. George S. Patton, Jr. was 57 years old in March 1943. He had commanded tanks in World War I and written armored warfare doctrine between the wars. He was known as a brilliant trainer and a relentless disciplinarian. Patton demanded perfection. He accepted no excuses. He believed discipline under pressure separated winning armies from losing ones. Patton did not believe American soldiers were inferior to German soldiers. He believed they were poorly led and poorly trained. Given aggressive leadership and proper tactics, he believed Americans would win every time. Eisenhower had worked with Patton for decades. He trusted his ability to rebuild shattered armies. He also knew Patton was ruthless with officers he considered incompetent. That ruthlessness was exactly what Second Corps needed. On March 6th, Eisenhower relieved Frendenow and appointed Patton commander of Second Corps. Patton's orders were simple: fix this, make them fight, do it fast. Patton issued his first directive within hours. Every soldier would wear a helmet and full combat gear at all times, no exceptions. The first officer he fired was sitting at a desk without a helmet. He didn't even have time to stand. Patton told him to pack his belongings and report to the rear immediately. 20 years of service ended in one sentence. Officers without helmets were relieved on the spot. Within 24 hours, every person at headquarters looked ready for combat inspection. Patton's second directive enforced saluting and military courtesy rigidly. That night, Patton met his senior commanders. The soldiers had not failed at Kasserine, he told them. Leadership had failed them. March 7, 1943. Patton drove to the front. At the 1st Battalion headquarters he visited, the commanding officer was absent. The executive officer couldn't identify unit positions. Patton relieved the battalion commander immediately and warned the executive officer he would be next if he didn't know his situation by morning. At another position, a company commander had placed his command post 500 yards behind his troops. Patton told him a commander belongs with his lead elements. The officer was relieved. For 3 days, Patton toured the front relentlessly. He fired officers who stayed behind, officers who couldn't answer questions, officers who didn't control their units. The message spread instantly. Get to the front. Know your positions, or you're done. Every Jeep engine made officers tense. There were no second chances. The effect was brutal and effective. Patton didn't just remove leaders, he trained replacements. Tank tactics shifted from defensive to aggressive maneuver. Artillery coordination became immediate. Infantry and armor trained together daily. Speed and initiative replaced hesitation. Eisenhower approved an offensive towards El Guitar, scheduled for March 17th, giving Patton only 11 days. Not every officer was fired. Those who fought well were promoted. Omar Bradley became Patton's deputy, managing staff coordination while Patton drove operations. Competence was rewarded, punishment was punished. By March 15th, 2nd Corps had been reshaped, not just tactically, but psychologically. Soldiers stopped thinking of themselves as defeated and started thinking of themselves as dangerous. March 17th, 5:30 a.m. American artillery opened fire near El Guitar. Infantry and armor advanced. By noon, American forces had captured the objective. On March 23rd, German panzer divisions counterattacked. This time, 2nd Corps held. Artillery shattered the first wave. Anti-tank guns destroyed German armor. Infantry stood their ground. The Germans were stopped cold. El Guitar proved what Kasserine had not. American soldiers could fight and win when properly led. Patton commanded 2nd Corps for only 40 days, but the culture he imposed lasted the war. Officers learned that leadership under fire was unforgiving. Rank offered no protection. Patton saved the army by breaking it first. He sacrificed the careers of the few to save the lives of the many. And when 2nd Corps attacked at El Guitar, they fought not because they were ordered to, but because they finally believed they were worth fighting for. By the time the dust settled in North Africa, the transformation of 2nd Corps was undeniable. What had collapsed in panic at Kasserine Pass had learned to stand, fight, and win. The terrain had not changed. The enemy had not weakened. German armored units were just as lethal, just as disciplined, just as experienced as before. What changed was leadership. The American army did not suddenly discover new weapons or superior numbers. It discovered accountability. Patton understood something many armies learn only after catastrophic losses. Courage alone is not enough. Good intentions are not enough. Administrative competence is not enough. Combat leadership demands decisiveness, aggression, presence, and the willingness to act under pressure when lives are being lost by the minute. Officers who lacked those qualities, no matter how loyal or hard-working they were, became liabilities once the shooting started. Patton removed them without hesitation because hesitation had already cost thousands of lives. The price of that transformation was high. Careers ended overnight. Men who had worn the uniform for decades returned home quietly, carrying reputations that would never fully recover. The army protected itself by avoiding courts-martial or public disgrace, but the personal damage was permanent. For those officers, there would always be the knowledge that they had been judged and found wanting when it mattered most. That human cost cannot be dismissed or minimized. Patton knew it. He accepted it. What Patton rejected was the idea that sparing feelings was more important than sparing lives. At Kasserine Pass, American soldiers paid for weak leadership with blood, capture, and humiliation broadcast to the world. Patton believed that if leadership failed again, it would be a moral failure of command, not an unavoidable tragedy of war. In his view, an officer who could not lead men under fire had no right to continue doing so simply because removing him was uncomfortable. The results spoke faster than any after-action report. At El Ghoutar, American forces fought with discipline, coordination, and resolve. They absorbed German counterattacks that would have shattered them weeks earlier. Tanks held their ground, infantry stayed in position, artillery responded rapidly and accurately. The same soldiers who had once fled learned that they could survive German attacks and inflict devastating losses in return. Confidence replaced fear not through speeches alone, but through proof. This psychological shift mattered as much as any tactical adjustment. Soldiers fight differently when they believe they are competent, when they trust their leaders, and when they see failure punished rather than explained away. Patton created a culture where excuses died quickly and performance mattered immediately. That culture endured long after he left Second Corps. The American Army would carry these lessons forward. Commanders would be relieved faster than in any other Allied force. Rank would offer less protection. Combat effectiveness would outweigh seniority. This system was imperfect and often harsh, but it created an army that could adapt rapidly under fire. In later campaigns in Sicily, Italy, and France, American forces would demonstrate a capacity to recover from mistakes and adjust leadership that many armies lacked. Patton himself embodied the contradiction at the heart of this system. He was brilliant, aggressive, and inspirational, but also abrasive, intolerant, and politically reckless. The same institution that empowered him to remove others without mercy would eventually remove him when he became a liability. In that sense, Patton became a victim of the very accountability culture he helped forge. The system did not bend for him any more than it had bent for the officers he relieved in North Africa. History continues to debate whether Patton went too far. Some argue that he destroyed careers unnecessarily, that not every failure at Kasserine was the result of incompetence, and that some officers might have improved with experience. Those arguments are not without merit. War does not offer controlled experiments, only consequences. But history also records what happened when leadership remained unchanged, and what happened when it was not. Second Corps did not become effective because time passed. It became effective because failure was confronted directly and leadership standards were enforced ruthlessly. The men who survived Kasserine went on to fight across the Mediterranean and into Europe. They stormed beaches, crossed rivers, and broke through fortified lines. Many of them lived because their commanders learned quickly, or were replaced by those who could. In the end, Patton's North African purge was not about cruelty or ego. It was about responsibility. In combat, leadership is not an abstract concept or a resume line. It is the difference between movement and paralysis, between cohesion and collapse, between survival and annihilation. Patton believed that an officer who could not provide that leadership had already failed his men, regardless of intent or character. The American Army emerged from North Africa changed. It was harder, more demanding, and less forgiving of weakness at the top. That transformation helped shape Allied victory in Europe. It also left scars on individuals, on reputations, and on the institution itself. Those scars remain part of the story. Patton saved the army by breaking it where it was weakest. He sacrificed the careers of the few to preserve the lives of the many. When Second Corps attacked at El Ghoutar, those soldiers fought with confidence, not because they were fearless, but because they believed in their leadership and in themselves. That belief, forged through discipline and accountability, became one of the American Army's most powerful weapons. And in war, belief, backed by action, can decide everything.